Hello and welcome to Bringing Education Home. I'm Herb.
And I'm Kristina. Together, we are bringing you ideas about education, entrepreneurship, and relationships that are both inside
and outside the box. If you like the show, be sure to follow Kristina on Facebook.
And leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Today, we have the pleasure of having Janet Krebs on with us today. And she is a recent acquaintance, but we met through a common group that we've been hanging out with and networking with. And it is wonderful to know that the Queen of Pop, and she'll tell you what pop means in just a minute, but the Queen of Pop is joining us today to give us some helpful tips, some insights, and working with parents. Welcome, Janet. So glad you're here.
Thank you. It's really exciting to see you guys. Vibrant family education. Who doesn't love that?
That is the plan. Exactly. We want to make sure that our families are vibrant. They're growing and developing and making the best choices for their children and for their families. And I know that we have a common goal in doing that as well, helping those families, helping those parents be productive and helpful for their children as they continue to grow.
Yeah, the family is the core of our future. As you know, we need stronger families in order to create a more stronger environment and a more stronger nation. So we're doing our best to take that where we can.
And I think it's interesting because we met in a networking group that is strictly
to help
visited. All of the members have families as their top priority, which is fantastic because that's like, it took me a while to find them. And once I did, I was like, oh, good, I'm home. People that actually align with my ideologies. It's really been fun. So
if you are listening in April of 2023, next week on April 12th, this family group that we're talking about, the Role Model Makers, is actually having a family summit, the Health, Wealth, Wisdom Summit. Janet will be speaking, I will be speaking, Herb and I will be interviewing. So if you're visiting this podcast in April of 2023, come find Health, Wealth, Wisdom, but it's number 9. So guess what? Even if it's not 2023 anymore, I bet you'll find one either in April or October of the year that you're visiting. So check that out if you can. Janet, tell us a little bit more about you. Where have you come from? Why are you the Queen of Pop? Tell us what that means.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to do so. Queen of Pop really just stands for positive outcome parenting. And I am absolutely blessed. When you have those moments and it's just like, oh my God, I mean, I'm 60 this year. So I get some reflective time, big time, right? That's a big number. And I am so blessed because when I look back at my resume, everything I've ever done has led to this moment. So I was in HR. I've worked with helping people, find employment. I've facilitated careers. I was an educator for 20 years. I taught standard curriculum or traditional curriculum, and I worked in a spaceflight simulator teaching STEM and 21st century life skills. What brought me to this was reflecting on my own life. I've got 2 fantastic overachieving children and who give me credit, by the way. That's actually key because they're 26 and 30. And so when they say, Mom, it's because of you that I'm the amazing human that I am, I was like, that was very humbling. So I started to think about that. And then I was hearing these voices of many of the parents in 20 years saying, how do you get my kid to do blank, right? Because by the time I get them home, I can't get them to do anything.
Yeah.
Conversely, come Monday morning, I would be thinking to myself, what happened over the weekend? Where did this child go? They were such high performers, and now it's Monday morning. I don't know what's happened. So I realized that there really was some wisdom and magic in what it was that I do with kids and I think a lot of it, honestly, Kristina, has to do with just setting them up to do more for themselves, which, as we all know, or should know, breeds competence, because success breeds competence, and success and competence equals confidence. And when we raise confident kids, now we're really on to something, because it's confident kids that go out into the world and just own it.
So I know that we just started this conversation, but I feel like I'm coming in to the middle of it. So what is positive outcome parenting, and what is it that you do? Because you said you've spent your whole life preparing for it. What is it that you're doing now? What is positive outcome parenting?
That's so my clients call me their magic potion to find, and really what we do is we analyze what's happening in their families and areas that they want to strengthen or change. And rather than additional necessarily curriculums, I love finding the opportunities for them to experience success, the kids that is, right in their own homes.
Right.
So you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to, it's not a class. You don't have to do anything. It's just parents being really intentional about setting their kids up to experience success. A lot of times that means to stop doing for kids what they can do for themselves.
It's
So my turn. So basically you coach parents on how to better manage their children in the house. So kind of like we're doing with Vibrant Family Education, where we do teaching of the kids. Ooh, I said do, but we do teaching of the kids. But a lot of what we do is actually the coaching of the parents on how to set up schedules, how to make the kids more successful, and how to have them actually take over more of the roles that they can. So is that more what you do?
I mean, yes and no. There should probably be a disclaimer up front. Gosh, my hand looks so big when I did that. I should watch that.
Well, you'll have plenty of opportunities.
Every parent out there comes from a place of love and operates from the best of intentions. So I never want anybody to feel like, we're watching and we're judging and, you should be doing this and blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like when a parent says, I can't get my kid to do anything. I was like, well, did you ask? And, or were there consequences when they didn't do what you asked them to do? Are the expectations within your family framework clear? And are there consequences when they don't deliver? So we find, you know how we've gone through life, the ABCs of something. There's so many C's that are connected to positive outcome parenting: communication, consistency, connection, consequences. There's 6 top ones that I love to cover. And honestly, it just, the most enjoyment comes when parents go, that's all I had to do. It's like, yeah, that's all you had to do. And they just didn't know, because they think that if I do more, I have to give them everything. I have to do everything for them, or whatever, wherever they're coming from. Oftentimes, and I think, Kristina, you and I talked about this, isn't it ironic that the less we do or the less we give to kids, the more they actually get out of it?
I think it goes back to that word expectation. We talked about that a little bit on our pre-conference, and that word expectation, because as classroom teachers, you and I both experienced that we didn't have a child one-on-one. So we had 25, 30 other kids in the room, right? And so we had to have the expectations, or the high expectations, of those kiddos to do their best, to work hard, and then ask for help when they needed it. So instead of us giving, doing it all for them, we've set up that role of they had to do it themselves first and then get the help and support that they needed later. And so, the parents don't get to see that usually because they have 1, 2, sometimes 3, 4 in the household. They don't have the same dynamic that a classroom teacher is dealing with. So we're coming at it from a little bit different perspective. Again, not judging, not saying that they're wrong, but they weren't handed a manual when their kiddo was born and said, here, this is how you do it.
I'm working on that right now, but writing a book is hard amongst everything else that we try and do. So
Right.
that'll be hopefully within the next couple of months that will go to the publisher. But yeah, I know that's like the one thing we didn't get a book. We get more information when we buy a car or, the air fryer or whatever the popular countertop appliance is right now,
Right, exactly.
I remember when Ben was born, I never really wanted to be a mother. It was kind of an irony for me. But I remember my girlfriend, I called her one night desperate because I guess I needed like a cough or whatever. And I was afraid to give him anything. He was really, really young. And so she comes to the door and I'm holding him out like this, right? And she says, Janet, you could start by bringing him closer to you and nurturing him. And I was like, oh my God, like talk about not knowing what to do initially. And then here we are 100 years later and doing quite well. So
that is awesome. And, it's one of those things that parents have to get used to, if maybe they weren't necessarily expecting to be the parent and then they have to be, there's those different steps that they have to do to change their dynamics, change the way they do things. Some of us always wanted to be parents. Ask him, I wanted 12 kids at first. And it's like, no, after 2, it's like, no, 2 is enough. I think we can do with 2.
Actually, after the first one, she goes, no more. But then we had a second one and she's like, definitely no more. But yeah. And yeah, they don't come with books. And, everybody expects parents to know because they're parents. It's like, having a child is so much different than being a parent. And, we can reach out to our parents, but, taking classes, doing all of that to become parents, especially because most parents start off rather young. They're doing stuff, they're building their career, they're in school or whatever they're doing. They don't have time to really go out and learn what they need to do. So it's like, here's a baby, go figure it out.
So that's where parenting coaches, parenting groups really come in helpful.
And wouldn't you agree? I don't know, I just thought of this actually. I know I was a little duped, but do you think parents of today understand the epic responsibility that it actually is?
Oh, no.
Right? No. Like, I think that's part of it. Like, aside from all that there is to do logistically and just from a maintenance perspective and everything else, just the entire, like, it's this cape of, oh my gosh, now I'm responsible for this human and it's huge. And if you're not prepared for that level of responsibility and commitment, you don't get a day off.
Yeah.
You just and never I mean, my kids are 26 and 30. And while I don't have to, maintain them anymore, and I am invited into their lives, which is an absolute blessing, it's still a responsibility to stay connected and to remain interested and to keep that communication open so that they want to share. And they still have things going on in their lives. Like, both of my kids are moving in the spring. Like, this is huge, like across the country, like big.
Yeah.
This might sound a little conspiracy theorist, but 100 years ago, families stuck together through multiple generations. So when the young parents were doing that, they had grandma, they had great grandma, they had aunts and uncles all around all of the time. So to help raise the child, to help be in that family, to help them understand and to keep the traditions. But with the family basically being under attack over the last many years, they've separated the family. And now it's like, oh, well, we'll send them to school and they'll learn all of that stuff in school. We'll we'll take them to grandma's like once a year. And that sense of family and community that it took to raise a child is gone. And so now it's like, oh, you two now have the responsibility not only to maintain your household, but do the whole family that used to be a whole family is now just you two. And it can be incredibly overwhelming without that extended family backup.
I was in California and my husband used to work. We made a choice, talk about a deal breaker. We made a choice to have coverage for the kids. I worked days and he worked nights.
Yep.
And it was great for the kids and it was terrible for the marriage.
Right.
However, the kids always knew that somebody was around. So that was just a commitment that we made. And to this day, they talk about that because part of our responsibility, I also believe, is to create an environment where kids feel safe. And even when the world is not safe and there's lots of things that are scary out in the world, when home, and you kind of, Herbert, referred to this, home is really, that's our sacred place, right? So once they're in the house, like, you're good now, you're safe, even though it's just me, we're good. And that was it was well worth the investment on that.
Yeah, exactly. I understand that because as we were working, I got a taste of a little bit the other side because when Herb was working full time at Intel, he worked 12-hour shifts. So there was half the week I was a single parent because he would come home after the kids were in bed and he would leave before the kids got up. So I understand that other point of view, but again, conscious choices of, even though he worked nights sometimes, he would get up and go get the boys or whatever so that they would see him and make sure that he was there. And we were showing the force together, the nurturing together of the boys.
Yeah, and with the 12-hour days, I was also off half of the week. So it was 3 days on, 4 days off, 4 days on, 3 days off. So 7 out of 14 days I was home and there with the kids. And we did family breakfast most of the time with her dad and family and aunts and uncles. So at least one day a week we were the large extended family did get together, and that was very helpful.
Yes, and the advantage for my schedule was I did not have to learn the cleanup song from Barney. Was it Barney? Clean up, yeah. I didn't have to do any of that. I didn't have to do Teletubbies. Stephen was the preschool. We were in a co-op, so he was the preschool dad. It was hilarious, and but I didn't have to do any of that.
Our kids thankfully were a little bit ahead of Barney, so we didn't have to do Barney of the Teletubbies either. There was actually still slightly better quality programming
a little bit,
before. So yeah, so we understand that though. That purple dinosaur was really irritating.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So when you're tell us about that leap. So you were teaching and then you stopped teaching and then you created your parenting opportunities. What was kind of the catalyst? Well, you told us why you did it, but how was that journey, that transition from like teaching, being in the classroom, et cetera, into this entrepreneur world?
That's a good question. I mean, yeah, do you just wake up one day and decide that you're going to do that? I think I was coached into it. Coaxed, better word.
Yeah.
Coaxed. I mean, I had a coach, luckily, because there was for me, I didn't know anything about really doing that. And I really just wanted, so I left behind a number of teacher friends and they complain about, traditional public education and what's wrong with it. And I could participate in that conversation a little bit, but I was out. Yeah. And I did not regret being out. You just kind of, so all right, here's the confession. When I signed up to be a teacher, I promised myself I would never be a paycheck collector.
Okay. Yep.
Because we all know those teachers that just want to get vested and they just hang in there until they get their retirement.
Yeah.
And I was on the cusp of a change in how curriculum was designed, how school days were planned out.
Yeah.
And I decided that I signed up to teach children, not deliver curriculum.
Yes.
And I felt like I was being asked to just simply step away from connecting with kids and focusing more on delivering curriculum. I couldn't do it.
I totally understand.
So that was really like, that's how I walked away, and it stung. I mean, it really did, but I had made a promise to myself, and I was good to my word, and I don't have any regrets. But in all fairness, I think, and I was doing other things. I mean, I have real estate. I've, we all have lots of ways in which we
have extra things
these days. Yeah. And so it took a minute, I believe, for all of it to distill down and say, you really were onto something. Like, you really did work some magic with a lot of kids. The space flight simulator was magical. And I realized that I touched over 6,000 kids whose parents, quite honestly, it was hilarious because I was like, who doesn't want to go and watch their kids perform in the simulator? So we had lots of parent engagement during the day. And parents would be like, can you just come to my house? And I really felt like, there was a time when I thought I would be like super nanny. US,
Yeah.
What is she, super nanny or nanny 911, whatever, but
yeah,
she's
nanny 911.
right. Yeah. We love her, Joe. She goes in and she's with the homes and she just kind of turns them upside down a little bit and gets them back on track.
Yeah.
And I actually had people say, you should do this. Like, you should be reality TV. I was like, I don't know that I could do that, but when you get that feedback, that kind of feedback over and over again, or you bump into families who say, oh my gosh, I remember you back at, blah, blah, blah. And you just, like, my kids still talk about that day that they spent with you. And at some point, you just have to say, I own this, right? Like, I think I'm either ignorant, humble, modest, shy. I'm not sure. I know I'm an introvert. So it just never dawned on me that would have been of value because that was my job.
Right.
It came naturally to me. But then when I started thinking about, well, you did it with your kids, you've got like this great track record in the simulator. What is it that you actually did? And I started to kind of lay it out.
Right.
And what worked and what doesn't work, and what were the keys or tools, maybe that's a better word. Like, if you could hand somebody a little bucket of tools to say, if you're experiencing this, here's the toolbox. Let's play with a couple of these tools, and we may be able to flip the results that you are getting at home and make it more positive. And for me, when it's more positive, don't we want to bring fun back to family and enjoyment and laughter and sitting around the table and less, dialed into technology and less door slamming and more open doors? And so I just laid it out and I was like, I'm going to market it and see if parents, if I can be of service to parents outside of the classroom. That was a really long answer. I apologize, but
no, that's quite all right, because it reflects kind of my journey the last year or so as well, figuring out how vibrant family education was going to move forward and go.
Yeah. So kind of what I heard was that you cared about the children, you cared about teaching the children. So you couldn't be a teacher anymore because that wasn't actually happening in schools. And so by bringing that back to the parents, you're able to now actually have the effects that you're looking for, bring that love of learning back to the children. And once they find that, then they pull it in themselves. So by focusing on the kids instead of, like you said, the curriculum, and right now it's like we've already seen some posts of teachers who are counting down to the end of the school year. When Kristina first started teaching, it was like, oh wow, I'm gonna have to say goodbye in 3 weeks. And then towards the end, it's like, man, I can't wait for these next 3 weeks to be over. So that kind of,
it told me it was time.
yeah. So that countdown of, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose them in 3 weeks went away. And so now with the flight simulator, they got that back. And so now with what you're doing, you get to be, oh, look, she's back. She's here. Yay.
Yeah.
And so
It's really,
kids' lives.
Yeah. And when we positively impact kids, that just extrapolates out to everything, like, happy home, happy, it goes beyond, happy mom, happy life kind of, or happy wife, happy life. When you have a happy home, like that, for me, home, that whole little sentiment, home is where the heart is, but home is foundational.
Exactly.
Right. And when we shore up, spackle, put some concrete filler into a rocky, shaky, uneven foundation, then I really believe that that's our responsibility as parents.
Yeah.
We are frontline leaders. Like, we are demonstrating that to and for our children. So it's our responsibility and privilege, quite honestly, to create a really solid foundation so that as they go through all of the developments, then they are ready to leave the nest with confidence, and they're going to kill it. But one of my favorite stories, Ben was like 1. He was really agile, and he talked really early, and he looked like Winston Churchill without teeth. It was actually really cute, but he was 1, and he was very, like any kid, got up early, and I was a working mom. And so one night we had a side-by-side, which thankfully I don't do anymore, but back then it was fantastic because I put this little itty bitty Tupperware of milk on the bottom shelf. And he could open the door.
Right.
And I said to him, I said, this milk is going to be for your cereal. So when you wake up in the morning, you can have cereal. He's 1. So he goes off to bed, and his little booster chair or whatever. And I put a bowl of cereal with a little napkin with a heart on it, cover it up with the little spoon next to it. And the next morning I'm laying in bed, and I'm like, the house is really quiet. And I'm like, is something wrong? And I go out, and as I make my way down the hallway, single-story home back then in California, and I make my way down the hallway, I hear the voices of the television. And then I look at the kitchen table, and there is Ben sitting happy as a clam, eating his cereal, watching Saturday morning cartoons. And I was like, Ben, way to go. Like, you having a good breakfast? He was like, yep. He was so happy. I don't know what he was happier about, the cartoons, that being fed, or I knew in his face, because I said, good job, bud. You made your own breakfast. He said, yes, I did. Because he had an amazing vocabulary for a 1-year-old. And I thought that was like one of those subconscious triggers, like, wow, 1 year old. And he was able to experience such tremendous success. And then I was like, why? I'm going to just see what else I can give to him to practice. And that was the foundation of my entire parenting and teaching, was just to give ownership and opportunity back to the kid. And if they didn't make it, great, cool. That's what my job was. But boy, it was so much fun for them to surprise me and actually meet me where that high bar was. So yeah, that's one of my favorite stories, but maybe we'll call that the turning point. And thankfully that was now 29 and a half years ago. So I've got a lot of history practicing what I preach.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah. And, you know, same thing in the classroom is like setting them up to be as successful as possible. And if they don't make it, go back, regroup, figure out what the missing link was, the hole, whatever needed to be filled in, and fill it in. Yeah.
So one of the interesting things that we're coming across with our coaching is parents think that this is going to be really hard, or there's a lot of work involved. And one of the things that really confuses them is the advice that we give them is actually really simple little tools, really small things that they can change, and how big of an impact these small things. So is that your experience, or are you giving your parents like these complicated rituals, or are you finding it's just really simple little common sense things that they can put into place really easy that they just didn't think about?
Super simple, like right in your own home, super simple. You know, I'm a big fan of communication. I think that's essential, especially as they get into teens and they don't want to talk to you anymore. But when we start that early, then they become more able and willing to communicate, even if it's, you know, it doesn't have to be like the hard, intense stuff, but just to keep that open. We had a cup of conversation when my kids were growing up. So like 8 o'clock, the tea kettle would go off and I would just holler up the stairs and it would be like, hey, cup of conversations on in 10 if anybody wants to take a break. And they'd come down, we'd have some decaffeinated tea or hot chocolate, usually tea, and maybe a biscuit or a cookie or something, low sugar, of course. And we would just chat 10, 15 minutes, just like a little brain break from their homework. And then I would be like, okay, like, you know, off you go. And they would be like, thanks, Mom, and done, bye. Like just like an unexpected, like it's so simple. And it was a wonderful time to connect. And you knew you were doing something right when they said, hey, are we having a cup of conversation tonight? It was just like, well, I wasn't planning on it, but if you're asking, absolutely. So
exactly. So you have a set of parents come to you and their child is a little bit older and they haven't done this already. How do you get them started?
It just takes longer.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like somebody who has never been in a gym, and because I'm also a personal trainer, and they come and they're like, I've never worked out in my life. Right. It's like, well, I support you and we're going to do some really great things, but it's not going to take a week.
Yeah.
They're like, no, I get it. So it's the same thing. It just takes a little bit longer.
Okay. Yeah.
And yet we find that, or maybe you can speak to this. Do you find that most of the parents who seek help wait until their kids are tweens or teens? And
when that's when the issues start making big impacts, and they forget that if they would have done something earlier, the child would have known how to handle those issues a little bit better at that point. Yeah,
because there's a whole lot of at the younger kids, well, you just go do that, you just go do that. So there's more of a sense of the kids have to do what the parents say. And then when there's actually that time for communication, there hasn't been that build up, that training to be able to talk. There's no, you just do what I say, and they expect that to continue.
Yeah.
But that really does need to grow as well. And with the children and
I wish I could get access to kids younger. I just would, because like people do not believe me when I tell them that we didn't argue very much. Of course we had arguments. We're not like these freak parents that, you know, families that were, you know, kumbaya all the time. Of course not. But, and I just remember if the kids said something, you know, or asked for something, it was like, you know, we had a household economy, and I would say, my answer would be, can I do something? And I would say, well, let me check your account. And I'd come back and say, gee, I'm really sorry. Your account is a little deficient right now. You need to make a deposit, and then we can revisit this request, which meant that they probably hadn't done their chores, or they hadn't done something kind, or whatever the metric was at the time. And admittedly, sometimes I made it up, but I didn't have to say, no, you can't. I deferred. And that deferral, it wasn't personal.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, okay, mom's got to check the account. And then it was like, well, let's make a deposit. And it would be like, oh, well, can I take the dog for a walk for the next 3 days? It'd be like, yeah, that would actually make your account really pretty healthy. I think that sounds great. Good. And they came up with the solution.
Yeah.
They were part of the solution. They made the deposit. There was no argument. So they became brilliant negotiators.
I love it because you set them up for success. It wasn't a hard no, it was a how can you figure out how to make it.
And problem solving. Like I have these two, my kids are the greatest problem solvers ever.
Love it.
And I think a lot of it stemmed from, I didn't get a no, so I have to figure this out. How do I get from point A to point B? But there was no argument. It was stinking brilliant.
Yeah. Now there's a lot of parents who are actually afraid of their kids, and the kids run the house, and it's like, oh, I don't want the kid to cry. So, my little angel can have whatever they want. And that like sets them up not for success, maybe in the short term, but in the long term, they think, well, all I have to do is cry to get what I want. And then when they get to teenagers and they start crying, that doesn't work the same way. And so, yeah, I understand why helping the younger children get that sense of responsibility and growth mindset earlier can really, really make a difference. And again, that's what we're trying to do as well.
Yeah.
I just wish we could make that impact. One of my clients, the hardest thing I ever had to tell them, they looked at me like, that deer in headlight. And I said, well, unfortunately, this is what it looks like when your child is 18 and you have completely enabled them their entire life. And they looked at each other, and then they looked back at me, and they were like, you're right. That was really hard to hear, but we did this. And I was like, but you know what? It's good. It's all good. We're just going to undo it. We're going to unable a little bit, and there's still hope. Like, it's not a finger wag moment. It's not you did this and you were a terrible. It's not that. This is what we have to deal with. And we're going to have to go back and establish some new expectations, to use your word, Chris. And it's like, just reset, recalibrate. You got this, because you don't, I didn't finish my sentence. My brain goes faster. I love when kids fail at home, like fail forward at home, because it's not failure then, it's learning. Do all of that messy stuff when you're at home, because once you're 18 and you go out and you actually get yourself in trouble, or you make the wrong choice or the wrong decisions, it's like the real deal.
Yeah.
Like, this is serious stuff then. And it costs parents money if they can't, it gets really messy. So let's get a lot of that messy stuff out of the way, so that by the time they leave the nest, we're just like, we're here. Have a great, you're ready to fly. I've secured and bolstered your wings. You got this.
I love it. That is so awesome to hear. And I think that's the core point of it, is we want to make sure that we are enabling our kids in a way that they're actually responsible. They are the ones who are taking it and moving forward with it. We're giving them the tools to set up to be successful.
We're enabling our kids for success. We're not enabling our kids.
There you go.
Yeah, well, and I named the company, if you will. I just put everything under the umbrella of Raising Independence. And when I was messing around with messaging, geez, say that 3 times, that we either raise in dependence, or we are raising independence. I never really went anywhere with that, but it's actually a really fun play on inflection, if you will.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Awesome. Well, Janet, this has been a wonderful conversation. And before we leave, is there one more thing that you would really want to make sure that you said or you covered that you wanted our parents to hear?
Just be willing the greatest strength is to admit that you just need a little help. And that don't be afraid to ask for help.
All right. And we will be putting your information in our show notes, but just so that they can hear it from you, what is the best way that if our parents want to reach out to you, how can they get a hold of you? What is the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, I do have a landing page, but it's janetkrebs.com. But I just enjoy when people email me, quite honestly, because that starts the conversation. And I understand that there's really bright and shiny, glossy marketing out there, but my belief is that when we are working with parents, it's personal. So I just email me. I'm very approachable.
Excellent.
I usually get response. I mean, my response rate is definitely usually within 48 hours. So just reach out to me. Are you asking for the email?
Yeah, go ahead and say it out loud.
I use a really simple one. It's Janet Krebs. Ooh, there's one. Janet Krebs, RI, which is Janet Krebs Raising Independence. So Janet Krebs, RI @yahoo.com.
Beautiful. I love
Super
it.
simple.
Thank you so much, Janet. It has been a pleasure talking with you.
You guys are so fun.
Yeah, I hope that our families have gotten a little bit of awesome information and some little key tidbits that'll help them along the way. And I know we're going to keep in touch because our paths will be crossing back and forth, but parents and families, let us know how we can help you. We're here for your success. And until next time, are we good?
So we're good.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful
day.
week.
It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Nope.